Hey there, amazing fans! Before we dive into today's drama, don't forget to subscribe, smash that like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support means the world to us. Now, welcome to another relaxing moment with Sugar Stories. Grab a seat, sit back, relax, and let's journey into the story together. Chioma Nwosu had always known her place in the family, at the very edge, barely visible, and never truly included. She had been told the story so many times, she could recite it like scripture. Her father, Chief Dominic Nwosu, a respected businessman in Enugu, had fallen in love with a young village schoolteacher named Adiz. They were married quietly, without the grand fanfare his wealthy family expected. But when Chioma's mother became pregnant, everything changed. The Nwosu elders didn't approve of Adiz's modest background. She wasn't society material, they said. She didn't have the right accent, the right family connections, or the polished charm to host business dinners. Madam Ifeoma, a wealthy widow from Lagos with connections to powerful politicians, arrived in the picture shortly after. Within months, Adiz was sent away, and whispers of a better marriage began. Chief Dominic married Madam Ifeoma in a glamorous ceremony splashed across national newspapers. Adiz faded into the shadows, raising her daughter in a small rented apartment, far from the sprawling mansion Chioma had only seen in photographs. Yet, her father never completely disappeared. Every Christmas, a small envelope arrived, school fees, a new pair of shoes, sometimes a note in his familiar handwriting. My Chioma, I am proud of you. One day, they will know who you are. But one day never seemed to come. That sunny Saturday in March was supposed to be a grand family affair. The Nwosu mansion buzzed with activity. Caterers setting up long tables draped in white linen, a jazz band tuning their instruments, photographers adjusting their tripods. Chief Dominic was turning 70, and Madam Ifeoma had spared no expense to throw the party of the year. Politicians, business magnates, and socialites were on the guest list. Chioma had received a text from one of her father's assistants the night before. Your father asked that you come tomorrow. Wear something nice. She took a deep breath that morning as she stepped into the compound, clutching the hem of her simple black and white dress. It wasn't designer like the gowns worn by her half-sisters, but it was the best she could afford. She caught sight of her father across the lawn. His hair was silver now, his face lined with age, but when he saw her, his eyes softened. He walked over and hugged her briefly, just long enough to make her heart ache. I'm glad you came, Chioma, he murmured. Stay close. She nodded, trying to ignore the disapproving stares from the guests. She knew what they saw. The other daughter, the one no one talked about in polite company. After the speeches, the band switched to a light tune, and the photographers called everyone together for the family portrait. It was a tradition. Every major Nwosu celebration ended with a framed photograph that would hang in the grand hallway for decades. Chioma lingered at the edge of the group, waiting for a signal from her father. But before he could speak, Madam Ifeoma's sharp voice cut through the air. Chioma, please could you stand back? This is just for family. The word hit like a slap. Guests turned their heads. Some smirked, others whispered. I am family, Chioma said quietly, her voice trembling. Madam Ifeoma's painted smile didn't waver. She lowered her voice so only Chioma could hear. Not in the way that counts, dear. Don't embarrass yourself or your father. A photographer cleared his throat impatiently. Chioma looked at her father, but he was already being pulled into position by Madam Ifeoma's eldest son. Her feet felt heavy as she stepped away, out of frame, into the shadow of a tall palm tree. The camera flashed, capturing the perfect Nwosu family. Madam Ifeoma in the center, her 3 children around her, and Chief Dominic smiling stiffly. Chioma's absence was invisible to the guests, but to her, it felt like being erased from history all over again. The party carried on, laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. Chioma sat alone at a table near the back, picking at a plate of untouched jollof rice. She was about to leave when her father approached, his gait slower than she remembered. Chioma, I'm sorry about earlier, he said softly. Why do you let her treat me like that? she asked, tears burning her eyes. He sighed, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. There are things you don't know yet. But trust me, the truth will come out. I've made arrangements. Arrangements? She echoed. He placed a hand on her shoulder. One day soon, everything will make sense. Until then, hold your head high. You are my daughter. No one can take that from you. It was the last real conversation they would ever have. 3 months later, Chief Dominic Nwosu was gone, and the same family who erased Chioma from the photo now wanted her completely out of the picture. What they didn't know was that the will reading would change everything. The black SUVs lined up outside the Nwosu family's private office complex looked like a silent convoy for war. Inside, the air was thick, not just with the scent of imported cologne and polished mahogany, but with something far sharper, unspoken hostility. Chioma stepped in quietly, clutching a small brown handbag. The polished marble floors reflected her every hesitant step. She had dressed in her best, a neatly pressed navy skirt, a white blouse, and the small silver necklace her mother had given her at age 12. In the center of the long conference table sat Madame Ifeoma, draped in an emerald silk wrapper that shimmered under the ceiling lights. To her right were her 3 children, Chidi, Kamsi, and Adora, each dressed in designer black as though attending not just the reading of a will, but a fashion show. The moment Chioma entered, Chidi leaned toward his mother and muttered something with a smirk. Kamsi, the youngest, looked her up and down, and then away, as if she didn't exist. The only person who acknowledged her presence was the family lawyer, Barrister Ugochukwu, a tall man with a calm but unreadable expression. "Miss Nwosu, please have a seat," he said, gesturing to the far end of the table, 2 full chairs away from the rest of the family. The hum of the central air conditioner seemed to grow louder as Ugochukwu opened the thick leather-bound folder in front of him. "We are gathered here today to execute the last will and testament of Chief Dominic Ifeanyi Nwosu," he began, his voice steady. "The chief appointed me as executor of his estate. All decisions are legally binding." He started listing assets, properties in Enugu, Abuja, and Lagos, several thriving businesses, shares in multinational companies, luxury vehicles, and a vast art collection. Each item was followed by a name from Madame Ifeoma's side of the family. Chioma sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. Every word was a reminder that she wasn't supposed to matter here. When the last asset was read and none had been assigned to her, Chidi leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Guess you came for nothing," he whispered loud enough for her to hear. Madame Ifeoma's lips curled into the faintest victorious smile. Ugochukwu closed the folder, then paused. "Actually," he said slowly, "there is one final clause sealed by the chief himself." The room shifted. Adora's eyes narrowed. Chidi leaned forward. From his briefcase, Ugochukwu produced a sealed brown envelope with the Nwosu family crest stamped in red wax. "Chief Dominic gave me explicit instructions to reveal this only after the reading of the main will," he said. He broke the seal and slid out a handwritten letter. The penmanship was slightly shaky, but still familiar. He began to read. "To my family, if you are hearing this, I have left this world. I have made choices in my life that I regret deeply, but there is one thing I will not leave unresolved. My daughter Chioma Nwosu is my only child within a lawful marriage. All others, though loved, were born outside the sanctity of the law. It is my wish that my entire estate be transferred to her name." Gasps erupted around the table. Chidi shot to his feet. "This is a lie. My father would never." But Ugochukwu raised his hand. "Please, there is more." He pressed a button on a small remote. A screen at the end of the room flickered to life, showing Chief Dominic seated at his study desk, speaking directly into the camera. His face was thinner than Chioma remembered, but his voice carried the same quiet authority. "Chioma, my child, forgive me for the years I allowed you to be treated as less than you are. Your mother, Adiz, is my lawful wife. We married in the Church of St. Michael's, Akka, on the 14th of March, 1995. I never divorced her. By law, you are my only legitimate heir. I have left every legal document with Barrister Ugochukwu to prove this beyond doubt. No one can take this from you." The room descended into chaos. Madame Ifeoma slammed her hand on the table. "This is absurd. That so-called marriage was nothing but a village fling. My husband was mine." Yugachukwu remained calm, sliding a folder across the table. Inside was the original marriage certificate from St. Michael's, along with certified copies of sworn affidavits from 2 witnesses, one of them a well-respected priest who had since passed away. "These documents have been authenticated and filed with the court," he said. "They are indisputable." Adaora's voice trembled with rage. "So you're telling us we're illegitimate?" The lawyer hesitated before answering. "In the eyes of the law, yes." Chief Dominic's legal marriage to Adiz Nwosu was never dissolved. Therefore, any subsequent union was invalid. The silence that followed was suffocating. Only the hum of the AC and the faint ticking of the wall clock filled the air. Chioma sat frozen. Part of her wanted to cry, part of her wanted to run. But another part, one she didn't even know existed, wanted to stand tall and look them in the eye. Yugachukwu closed the folder with a quiet finality. "As executor, I will begin immediate transfer of all assets to Miss Chioma Nwosu, the sole legal heir. Any objections can be taken to court, but I assure you, the evidence will stand." Madame Ifeoma's hands trembled as she clutched her wrapper. Chitty stared daggers at Chioma, while Kamsi simply shook his head in disbelief. Chioma's voice was barely above a whisper when she finally spoke. "I never wanted to take anything from you. I just wanted to be acknowledged as my father's daughter." No one responded. The truth had landed like a bomb, and the aftershocks were only beginning. Chapter 3. The sister they couldn't silence. The days following the will reading were a blur for Chioma. She barely returned home before news of the inheritance hit the city's gossip blogs. Chief Nwosu's secret daughter inherits billions. Socialite family declared illegitimate after DNA and marriage proof surfaces. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing, calls from journalists, old classmates, even distant relatives she barely knew. Some wanted to reconnect. Others demanded interviews. But not a single call came from the Nwosu mansion. On the 3rd day, Yugachukwu called. "Chioma, you'll need to come to the mansion. As the legal owner, you have to take inventory of assets." Her heart pounded as the iron gates of the Nwosu estate swung open for her, not as a visitor, but as its new mistress. The air felt different. The security guards who once avoided eye contact now greeted her with respectful nods. She walked through the manicured gardens, past the marble fountain, and into the grand foyer. Madame Ifeoma was waiting in the living room, her posture stiff, eyes cold. Chitty sat in the corner, arms folded. Adora scrolled furiously through her phone, pretending not to notice. Kamsi paced restlessly. "So," Madame Ifeoma began, "you've come to take what's yours." Chioma's voice was steady. "I came to take what my father wanted me to have." "And where was your father when I was building this home? When I was raising his children while I was being hidden?" Chioma cut in, her voice sharper now. "While I was standing outside family portraits. While I was told I wasn't good enough to even share his name." Silence. Kamsi stopped pacing. "Is it true?" he asked softly, looking at his mother. "Is it true that her mother was married to Dad first?" Madame Ifeoma's jaw clenched, but she didn't answer. The silence was all the confirmation he needed. Adora finally put her phone down. "So all this time, we were calling her the mistake, when we're the ones who," she trailed off, her voice breaking. Chitty muttered something under his breath and stormed out of the room. Yugachukwu arrived shortly after with 2 assistants, carrying thick folders and property documents. "Miss Nwosu, we'll need your signature here and here," he said, laying the papers on the table. Chioma signed without hesitation. The mansion, the businesses, the accounts, all were now legally hers. Madame Ifeoma watched with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You may have the title," she said coldly, "but you'll never truly be one of us." Chioma looked her dead in the eye. "I don't need to be one of you. I am my father's daughter, and this is my home now." Weeks later, the Nwosu estate hosted a charity gala in Chief Dominic's honor. Guests mingled in the same garden where Chioma had once stood on the sidelines. Midway through the evening, the photographer announced it was time for the official family portrait. This time, Chioma didn't wait for anyone's approval. She stepped to the center, holding her head high. Yuga Chukwu stood beside her for support, while Madame Ifeoma and her children lingered reluctantly at the edges. The flash went off, capturing a new chapter in the family story, one where the girl they tried to erase now stood as the rightful heir. Later that night, Chioma found herself alone in her father's study. She touched the leather armchair where he used to sit, running her fingers over the desk where his last letter had been written. She whispered into the quiet room, "You were right, Papa." The truth came out. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like an outsider. She felt like exactly who she was meant to be. Chioma Nwosu, daughter of Chief Dominic, and the sister they could never silence.